Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I have a confusing one. God's Child. I won't lie, I don't know where I heard about this manga. I had it in my list. I had it in the back of my head that I wanted to do it because I heard a few things about it. I heard that it has to do with a psychopath, which I'm all for. I like psychology. I'm very interested into psychopaths, narcissists, Machiavellians, and all that. So that's why this manga piqued my interest. There's some stuff in this manga that genuinely I will not be showing, like in general. And honestly, it's very disgusting. Like, actually, it's not that complicated of a story, but it's just weird. So with that being said, before I get into the video, warning, some scenes depicting RAPE, pedophilia is a big one in this, actually, and suicide. So yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments about the manga. If you like the video, like and subscribe. With that being said, let's get started with God's Child. Chapter 1, Child of a Black Sun. The chapter starts off by showing us a page of a baby in a toilet. This is how I was born. I was born from my mother's asshole. You must allow me absolute freedom. Where will I go? Very weird place. I don't think babies get born from assholes. I don't think so. I feel like you'd be digested at that point. It could have just been me, but I thought babies were like made in stomachs. Yeah, that's not the case. Cause like the belly gets big and like you don't know what's down there at that age. So you just think, how in the world does your stomach get that big? I don't know where I came from. I don't know why I was born. When I was awakened, I was floating inside of my mother's stomach. Not a sea of warm amniotic fluid, but one of acid and digestive juices. My brothers and sisters one by one were digested. The unworldly yet frightening folds of the stomach wall moved continuously. I was afraid. I thought I would be digested. That was the first emotion I felt, and it was the only emotion I felt until the day I was born. I implanted myself on my mother's lining and covered myself in my mother's mucous membrane. It became my skin and protected me. I waited in fear in my mother's stomach for the time to come. And then the time came for me to be born, and I was excreted. This is how I was born. A black sun filled my hazy vision. Its light shone down on me. The black sun was my mother and my God, covered in blood and excrement. I was the God of revenge. This is where my story begins. I am the child of blood and excrement. I am the child of God. And I stood up and begin my life to get revenge on this world, he says as he holds his arms up like a cross. If you couldn't tell from that very odd intro, this is going to be an experience. Chapter 2. Childhood. At the time, there was a custom in the region I was born in. If a baby walked before his first birthday, a large ball of sticky rice was placed on its back so it wouldn't run away from his parents. I stood up at 10 months, and as expected, my parents and grandparents gathered around me and tied a ball of sticky rice to my back. But I didn't fall. I don't know who, but someone pushed my shoulder until I fell over. All they did was look down on me and laugh. I didn't cry. They just stood up looking at me, and I laid there as if I were dead. We then cut to him and his mother at a barbershop. I was raised as a girl until I was 2 and had never gotten a haircut. We then see them in a barbershop waiting and reading a book till he looks up and tells us the barber chairs had become what I can only assume were execution platforms. And one by one, boys climbed onto the platforms and were melted. It seemed somehow familiar, he says. I honestly won't lie. I think there's a little bit of schizophrenia in this. I don't think you just miraculously see chairs turn into execution platforms either. And I think what he's about to tell us next kind of, confirms that. I look up at my mother, but in her place was an old witch. And she said to me, "Those are your brothers." He then tells us on how he understood those words. You are the only survivor out of countless children who have died. We now see him as a baby playing with his feces because his parents failed him when he came to toilet training. So he just pooped wherever he wanted. The putrid smell induced a sort of ecstasy in me, and sometimes I would even eat it. Unable to take it anymore, his parents took him to the doctor, and his idea was to give him clay. And it eventually worked. His feces obsession subsided, and he just made clay figures day after day, to the point to where his entire room was filled with clay figures. But one day, he decides to smash them all. We then see him holding a head with dead bodies around him in his room. He described it as his first atrocity. One day, our pet cat was killed. That cat loved me and I loved him. He's now holding an axe in his hand with blood on his shoes. I cried all day long. The adults tried to comfort me, but they never suspected that I was the killer. And when I myself could no longer believe I killed the cat, I stopped crying. We end off the chapter with him in the backyard playing while looking at another cat. He tells us that was the year I started elementary school. Chapter 3, First Love. My parents put me in a group of children who were emotionally disturbed, as well as those with personality problems and mental disabilities. They must have sensed something was off about me, but it was a waste of time. By this point, I had already rejected things such as emotions and personality and deemed them as unnecessary to my life. And of course, I was not mentally disabled. Even though psychopathy isn't really a mental disorder, I know it may seem like it is, but it's actually not. I still feel like there's something mentally going on with this man, because you don't just kill cats like that. Now, granted, I'm not a professional psychologist, so I would not know. But I don't think people with normal minds just kill cats. Well, I mean, his mind isn't normal. He's a psychopath, but I think there is something mentally wrong with him. He went to the group every Sunday and avoided physical contact because the kids there were gross. They drooled and they picked their noses. I think it was a normal reaction, but I was labeled as uncooperative, and it was taken as a possible sign of autism. So I tried my best to build relationships with adults. He even went as far as to playing certain games that the kids played, but he called it ridiculous. According to him, there was only one thing that made it all bearable, and it was a college girl who volunteered, because she was the only one to notice that he didn't really like playing with the other kids, so she'd play with him. I liked cuddling with her, even though I didn't understand fun. I think that must have been pleasurable. It was only because of her and the desire to please my parents that I ended up enduring the humiliation of that group. But one day, he was sitting outside and didn't see her, so he looked around everywhere for her, even in the woods, till he found a cabin where he heard screaming. He looked inside and saw that she was getting raped. Obviously, like I explained earlier, I'm not going to show any of it, because just reading it myself, I felt very uncomfortable. Also, just in general, I don't want to show that. So I'm just going to read what he says. At that time, I had no clue what was happening, but the sight of her bloody and swollen face made him feel some type of way, I guess. He then explained that was my first sexual experience, and it would go on to influence my later sexual encounters. What? Yeah, while she was laying there, all bruised and bloody, he decided, as a young kid, to take his chances. I went into this expecting something completely different, and this completely inverted my expectations. At this point, I knew that this manga was going to be different. I don't think I've ever heard that happen before. Does that happen? It probably does. There's 8 billion people in the world. There's a chance that something like that has happened before. Chapter 4. Pray. He's older now, and he's in a classroom. My parents were surprised and pleased that their child, who had once been considered autistic, was doing fine in public school. But to me, this place was a prison filled with monkeys and pigs, and I think it has absolutely nothing to do with me. He then explains that in society, there are ways to adapt, and one of them is to not stand out. But in some cases, it does the opposite, he says. So the trick is to be completely average. Be averagely cheerful, be averagely smart, be averagely stupid, be averagely obedient. I've spent my days with a faint cowardly smile on my face and honed these skills to distance myself from society. Because to him, it felt meaningless, and even putting on an act didn't even feel anything. We then cut to a group of kids lined up, and apparently they picked a single girl to torment. We then see a pincushion on the desk, and then the kids grabbed her arm and then held her down. A kid tells her, if you make a sound, you'll get another one. If you cry, that's another one on top of that. We then see, uncomfortably, a needle go into her fingernails, and then there's another one as well. Then the girl asked her to say thank you, so she listens and says thank you. There was no particular reason, just that this girl didn't have the skills to navigate childhood society. Then one day, there was a video camera going around the classroom of the girl going into the bathroom with the other girls surrounding her on the toilet, forcing her to defecate, then eat it. He then says the rest of the kids were excited as monkeys and as indifferent as pigs. These sly savages would one day become adults and be good citizens. Part of that is kind of true. Like, when you look at society, we see kids as innocent, but in reality, kids can probably be doing just as messed up stuff as adults are. Kids don't get tried that way until they're in like their mid to maybe even late teens. Then that day after school, he stayed after to help a teacher till he saw her alone at her desk staring off into space. Apparently she had wet herself, and her fear was so great no expression could convey the extent of it. So her face was blank. Why didn't she try to escape? Surely there couldn't be anything worse. So she piqued my curiosity. Just as the rest of the class saw her as prey, I saw her as prey as well. So I approached her. He then tells her, "Shall I help you?" She then looks up and he says, "Shall I kill them for you?" End of chapter 4. Bullies suck. In this chapter, they made him look more innocent than he actually is. Chapter 5. The first murder. This chapter starts off very strong, showing us a dead girl's body with her head and hands cut off while flowers stick out of her, back area. That morning, the corpse was behind the gym, so the students could see it before the teachers did. The students stood around in a circle, quiet. No child was loud or disruptive, just silently looking at the corpse. Fear ruled that day, he says, but soon the teachers found out and the kids were sent in the building. As the police arrived, the kids were looking out of the window, and because of the murder, the kids were sent home. School was closed for a while, and of course, it was all over the newspapers and the TV. I pretended to be indifferent. He then rethinks and says, no, I was really indifferent. We then cut to another dead girl hung up in a park that day after everyone returned from school. The school took it as a challenge and set up cameras all over the school. That was all those pathetic adults could come up with, he says. There was another murder in the bathroom. We now cut to him in his living room with his parents. Society had made up its mind. This was the work of a perverted serial killer. The reports were quite detailed, but not a single one mentioned the fact that the victim's anus were thoroughly violated. It was ridiculous. Even at a time like this, sex was a taboo subject for children. So the crime was distanced from us. Children are always viewed as victims. That was part of my plan, and it made it feel rather omnipotent. But it also felt like I was encased in a bubble of vague nihilism. One day he was walking around till he felt somebody's presence, so he turned around and it was the bullied girl. They have not spoken since that day, so he stopped to talk. She tells him, "Please stop." "Why?" he responds. "You killed someone who wasn't involved." He says, "There's no one who wasn't involved. You'll get caught." "No, I won't. I'm sure of it." "How can you be sure?" "Because it has nothing to do with me." "What if I tell?" "You won't. I'm sure of it." That's that cockiness that psychopaths have. The fear of just anything. Gone. This man's not worried about getting caught. He is just there relaxing. She then looks at him and says, "You're right." She then grins and then skips off. It was the first time that he had ever seen her smile, but that smile could have been fake, or it could have been a sign of no escape, because we see at the end of the chapter that she hung herself from a tree that day. Okay, hello, editor me here. This part kind of confused me initially when I was reading it, but now that I'm actually editing this video, I actually sat down and thought about what possibly could have happened here. She was already a very depressed person in the first place. That's pretty darn obvious. And I think when he killed someone that wasn't involved, she felt guilty, which only made it worse. So I think her talking to him was like her last chance of kind of getting him to stop, and that way she can feel kind of less guilty, I guess. I don't know. When she told him, "What if I tell?" and he said, I won't, I'm sure of it. I think that was her last straw. The part of this that kind of confused me initially was, why did she smile if she was just gonna go off and kill herself? Some cases when people are depressed and they're about to unfortunately kill themselves, they feel happy, which crazy thought, by the way. Like, check up on your friends, please. They feel happy before they kill themselves. So that could be the case. She was already planning on killing herself, and I think him saying she won't tell was like her last straw, and she knew that she was gonna get out of here in the first place. And I think that's what she was happy about. That makes this character so much worse. I cannot stand this dude. Chapter 6. Boys. He's now 14 years old, and these 5th and 6th graders would hang around him all the time in an abandoned factory. He didn't know why they wanted to be around him. Years had passed since that incident, and no one spoke of it to anyone. It was like as if the whole town was determined to erase it from their minds. But of course, these kids had no way of knowing, but they did indeed feel a sense of darkness in me. Something children are insignificantly fascinated with. That something was deaf. We then see him in a classroom alone. Although I was going through puberty, I had no interest in girls. I only felt disgusted at the sight of their grossly swollen chest. We then cut to him and the boys, and he rather enjoyed watching them play cowboys and Indians. He would divide the boys into 2 groups of 6, one cowboys and the other one Indians, and of course, he was the leader of the cowboys. We then get a large page of the boys playing with him on top of a horse. Our games were always historically accurate, with the Indians getting slaughtered. They even ran around naked and were killed and scalped. With a pile of scraps at my feet, I felt a sort of ecstasy. To him, it was a murderous impulse that grew on him since the incident. Now, this is the scene that I'm talking about the whole pedophilia part. So I'm gonna read it in a way that I don't get demonetized. After they were done playing, all of the boys would get naked and start touching on each other sexually. To him, it was innocent touching. No, it was not. That's not innocent touching. I'm sorry. That's not innocent at all. To the others, they treated it as sexual. I don't think that's the case. I think you're treating this as sexual. There's nothing wrong with being gay, but the whole pedophile part, no. I get that he's 14 and all, but that's still weird as shit. He's in 9th grade. These are 5th and 6th graders we're talking about here. But one day, a group of boys brought a boy into their lair. He was hungry and he was a runaway. His parents weren't even looking for him. He described the boy as dirty yet beautiful. He asked the boy, "Are you hungry?" The boy nodded his head. So he threw a roll down at him. The boy picked it up and started to eat. "Did they abandon you? Did your parents abandon you?" he asks. The boy didn't answer. He just kept eating. And he looked at him with dead eyes. Chapter 7. Holy Communion. The chapter starts off with him looking down at the runaway kid eating. To be honest, I fully understand what I was to him at that moment. The boy then turns to him and he had completely lost the will to resist. We then see them both holding knives. "I will be the one to decide," he says. He then cuts the boy's cheek and licks it. He then cuts his shirt off and leans over the boy and then puts him in his lap. We see the boy is tearing up. The kids are watching this as he puts the boy to the ground, and we can only assume what he does to the kid. Come on, man. That's too much. But afterwards, they look at each other and he pulls out a knife and stabs the boy in his back over and over again, leaving him in a pool of his own blood. He then stands covered in blood. The other boys watch in silence. It was nothing more than a religious sermon, he says. He then cuts off the cheeks of the boy and throws them in front of the other boys. They then get on their knees and he tells them, "Eat its bread." They devour the flesh with tears running down their faces in the mixture of blood and feces and semen. See what I mean? That's too much. Why? Why? What's the point of that? At that moment, something new was born. They then went out into the woods to now bury the boy's now chopped up body. They dug a hole in silence and he watched them. He says, "I felt something crystallize within me. It was an awakening and perhaps a new determination. I became aware of my influence and decided to make use of it." Just disgusting. Chapter 8, The Path to Freedom. He's sitting on a chair looking at the boys. He's at the age of where he's starting to look more like an adult. He says the boys' bodies were changing too, and they were at the age where they were looking their most beautiful. They then show him and the boys doing things together. Now that I'm reading it, I'm feeling very overwhelmed with the amount of freak shit that's going on in this. I think a part of me, when I was initially reading it, I think a part of me just wanted to get it over with. Pretty much, the sexual encounters became more direct. But him and the boys weren't satisfied with just murder, so they started attacking vagrants, which were easy targets. I love the way the boys' eyes glittered with bloodlust, he says. They picked the right time to do a kill, and the police hardly pursued the cases, and the society that cried over the handful of dead children couldn't care less if outcasts died. I hated society's ugliness, he says. They then attacked random passbyers, which was also easy, because all they had to do was pick someone alone and stab them in their heart and walk off like nothing ever happened. And it took about an hour for an old lady to make a fuss about it. People didn't care, and no one was ever caught. The boys were satisfied with these thrilling games, but I alone felt something was missing, and I knew exactly what that something was. Freedom and clarity. I was no ordinary murderer, so he decided that he would have his parents killed by having the boys do so, because there can't be a motive, nor can there be any connection. And I took that rule seriously. We then see the mom and dad and the boys are outside saying happy birthday over and over again. And then they tie ropes around the dad's neck and blind the mother, saying happy birthday over and over again. They then slam the mother's face into a cake and burn the entire house down. Why? If you wanted freedom and clarity, run away. Clearly you don't care. So should you care if they look for you? For some reason, tears ran down my cheeks, and then I saw, in the flames, I saw the withering of my future. He now stands in his now burned down house, and it was his 17th birthday. Chapter 9. The Stumbling Stone. The chapter starts off with him in bed with somebody who I really hope is of age. Please be of age. I'm tired of reading that stuff. Once his parents died, they left him a large inheritance, and he used it to live out his life comfortably without any idea of labor. But for some reason, I was in an impasse. I wanted to proceed to the next stage, but it felt far away after killing my parents. Rather, my future lay in politics and religion. I was vaguely aware that I would have to dirty my hands. But he was bored with his choices and had lost his direction. Him and the person in bed then start to talk. "What is the matter?" the person says. "Nothing, just..." He stops and pauses. The person then responds with, "Just what?" "I was just wishing humanity would be wiped out soon." The scene then switches to one of the boys standing in front of him, and he wished to leave. He asks why. "There's this girl I like." He then questions if girls are fun or not, and the boy nods his head. He says, "All right, go. And if you ever wanted to come back, I will welcome you with open arms." The boy then runs off, and then the boys ask him, "Are you sure?" He then assures them that we do not chase those who wish to leave. We then see a close-up of his eyes, and the boy and the girl are all hanging out, going out, eating, going to the zoo, and then we see them walking home. The girl is then sitting alone at a park bench, and the boys are watching her. She then looks up to see them surrounding her with gloves on. They then start to beat her up, and the boy who left hears what's happening, and he runs after it. But he's too late, and she sprawled out naked on the bench, bruised and killed. The chapter ends with the boy staring off. Chapter 10. Judas. This chapter has two things going on at once, so I'm gonna briefly explain what's going on with one of those. The boy that left the cult is now burying his girlfriend while the main character talks. He then calls himself a fool, breaking his own rule for murdering with no reason or connection. Since the world began, there was one emotion that enveloped me like a membrane, so constant that I wasn't even consciously aware of it. Fear. I felt as if part of my body had been cut off, and into that wound flowered the world that I most hated and feared. Having previously kept safe by my membrane of fear, it was unbearable to me. I felt myself violated. It was not that he betrayed me, nor that I betrayed him. It was that my emotions betrayed my logic. It was too late. I was at a dead end. We then see the dead girl's body laying on the ground while he says, I punished the girl. Why did I not kill him? Did I hope he will return to me? But the boy did end up returning, and we see him get on his knees before him, and he says, sorry. He then gets down to comfort the boy. The boy says, I'm sorry again before he stabs him in the leg. Thank God. Kill this man. Please kill this man. I'm so tired of this dude. This is the worst main character ever. Okay? This character sucks. I've never read a more terrible main character in my entire life. Like, oh my gosh. Please murder this dude, okay? All right, so I just got done editing chapter 10, and I think chapter 10 does a really good job of summing up this entire story. The manga is called God's Child or Child of God. I don't know, really. He also believes that he's Jesus, because in this chapter it's called Judas, and Judas is one of the 12 apostles of Jesus that ended up betraying Jesus. So he's pretty much saying, when he says his emotions betrayed his logic, he's pretty much saying that his emotions betrayed him because he believes that he's Jesus. And from earlier, I said this man was schizophrenic, and I think I'm right about that. Some people with schizophrenia develop something called a messiah complex, which I just learned about, by the way. This dude has a messiah complex. Like, he believes he is Jesus, meaning he believes that he is a higher power than a lot of people. But yeah, I think this chapter sums up this story a lot in just this one chapter, and I didn't realize that until now, which I find that really cool. And I think that's probably one of the best parts about this story. The character still sucks. I still don't like the character. He's still disgusting as hell. Final chapter, Judgment. The chapter begins with us looking at the MC on the ground, bleeding, not able to walk. The boys are looking at him and keep saying, what should we do? They then all huddle around him while he lies down on the ground motionless. And the boy who stabbed him says, give him the death he deserves. The other boys ask, what should we do? Again, he replies with, let's feed him to the pigs. We now see the boys riding in a truck. They get to where they're needed to be and carry him out on a wooden plank. They then throw his body into a pig pen. The pigs swarm around him and kill him. He ends off the chapter with half of his head on the ground, saying, humanity should probably rejoice that my life ended like this. But you mustn't get careless. I will always be reborn again somewhere. And that is the end of God's Child. I don't know how to feel about this manga still. I really don't. And from what I've read about like reviews and stuff, I'm not the only one that feels that way. But I was going into this hoping that I wouldn't feel that way, hoping that I would have a different view on everything. I don't have a different view on everything. Well, actually, I do kind of have a different view. That old intro was pretty much me just dogging on the story the whole time, saying that there really wasn't anything to it. After editing the video, though, I will say that I do have a slight different view from when I initially read it. And yes, most of that mainly comes from chapter 10. Now that I understand that this guy might actually potentially be schizophrenic, I'm not saying that any of his actions justify what he did in the story. But part of it, knowing that he could be, makes it a little bit better of a story as a whole. Previously, I thought this story sucked. I thought the story wasn't all that good. And I still kind of feel like that the story has a lot of flaws that I personally still don't like. The main character. I don't like the main character. The main character sucks. I would probably only say the only really redeeming things about this story is the fact that it does a good job at painting what a God complex looks like and painting what could potentially happen if you go unchecked as a mental case. The art style, though, I will praise the art style, because unlike what I said a few seconds ago, the art style, I think, really does a good job subliminally at portraying the main character as a whole. And just the story. Part of me is kind of happy that I did end up reading it, because I did end up learning a lot from the story. And I think it's, the story's all right. It's an all right story. If this was bad, the story's like right here with me still. So yeah, if you made it this far into the video, I would really appreciate you liking and subscribing. And go check out some of my other videos, because they're just as good as this one, potentially. That's up to you to decide, really. But yeah, bye.